programs at cityclubofeugene.org or our YouTube or Facebook. Please consider becoming a member if you'd like to support our rigorous volunteer work as Oregon's only city club that provides weekly forums. There are many ways to partner with us, and I'd like to thank our Diamond community sponsors. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. Get more information at uoregon.edu. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. Thank you to the City of Eugene and to Lane County for their generous support, and to our web host, 9 Planets, whose website support is critical to our functioning, making it easy to sign up as a member, wink wink, or to learn more about us. Quick reminder, please silence all cell phones in the hall. And with that, I turn the mic over to my colleague on the board and the coordinator of today's program, Eric Jura.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wonderful to see you all here today. Before I begin with the introduction, I just wanted to acknowledge the contributions of my co-coordinator for today's program, Don Doucette. It was the first one he's worked on. He couldn't be here today, but I wanted to acknowledge his valuable contributions to putting this program together. In Lane County, there are 16 public school boards, 1 educational service district, 6 public utility district boards, 12 city council, city manager boards, and over 20 special districts. And of course, throughout the state of Oregon, that number goes over 1,000 for all of those sorts of things. So that's why we decided that it might be a good idea to have this discussion of effective public governance boards. A little bit of information about the boards themselves, their members. Members of public governing boards are community volunteers elected by the voters of their district, ward, whatever the geographic unit is. Typically, the board members have no formal training related to the operation of the organization they govern, and they are uncompensated in most cases. The sole employee of the Board of Governance is the CEO, the superintendent, the general manager, the city manager, whatever the title, and that person is responsible for the operations of the organization and providing the support necessary for the board to carry out its governance duties. And then finally, decisions that are enacted by, or decisions that are made by the board are done so by a majority of the members of the board. Here to help us understand how this form of governance works is Emily Nishik, who's in her 11th year as Executive Director of the Oregon School Boards Association, and I would like to note that she drove down from Portland today to be here with us. So we really appreciate having her and her expertise. We also have John Brown, eWeb Commissioner, currently in his 20th year of service on the Eugene Water and Electric Board. And then I would also say, following 36 years of service on the Eugene and Eugene Springfield Fire Department, we have Randy Groves, who is now a city councilor and is serving in his 2nd term. Please give them a warm welcome. So Emily will lead us off today, and I'll turn the microphone over to her.
Can you all hear me okay? Thank you so much, Eric. First, I just want to clarify, I've been with the organization for 2.5 years, so I'm going to lower your expectations just a little bit. My name is Emily Nishik, and like you said, I'm the Executive Director for the Oregon School Boards Association. And I'm here to just talk a little bit about effective public governance and how OSBA trains education school boards across the state. And we use a model that is called balanced governance. And we work with 197 school boards, K-12 school boards, 19 education service districts, 17 community colleges, and many charter school boards across the state that are members of OSBA. So if you aren't familiar with the Oregon School Boards Association, we do a lot of board training. We also provide policy support, legal services, communication support, and really work to support school boards so that they can be strong, effective board members within their community to ensure that we are supporting students across the state, to ensure that they are thriving within their schools, and that administrators and superintendents or executives are being supported within their districts. So our role is really to support the board so that they can support the district. And so I'm going to share a little bit of our training that we do. Typically, this is called a Roles and Responsibilities training, and it is 3 hours long, and I am going to do highlights in 15 minutes. So we're just going to touch on some of the most important pieces that we feel are important to have an effective public board. The first thing that a public board and also the public honestly really needs to understand is that governance is not management. Governance is really the what. It is looking at the long-term strategic focus of the organization and really doing that through setting the strategic plan, the vision, and policy. The policy is really the guardrails for the organization. It is how the organization should be operating. And then the how is really what the administration and your executive should be doing. And that is how the policy should be carried out. That is the operating plan for school districts. That is the administrative rules on how they are going to carry out the policy and bringing clarity for the staff on carrying out the work of the board and the direction that the board has given. And that is really important for a board to understand and individual board members to understand. And it's a line that sometimes can be blurred and the public doesn't often understand that the board's role is definitely not to manage the organization. That is really left up to the executive and the executive's team. When boards blur this line, they can often wind up micromanaging, or on the opposite side of that, they wind up rubber stamping. And this can create a feeling of micromanagement or for the team to feel like they're under the microscope, or a lack of accountability for the team. And so it really can create chaos within the organization. When boards stay in their lane and they know their roles and responsibilities, they stay focused on the vision, strategic priorities, they create accountability with strong policy that is up to date as their guide, and they stay focused on the long-term impact of the organization. And this creates clarity for the organization. It creates clarity for the board members, for the staff, and for those that you're serving, and for your community. Another very important pillar of the governance structure that we teach is that the board governs as a body, not as an individual. Individual board members have influence, and they certainly come to the board, especially when they are running for a position, with their own interests. But boards only have the authority to act as a collective. As Eric mentioned, they can only take action as a full board. They can only give direction as a full board with a vote. And oftentimes, new board members think of themselves as individual legislators. And we are seeing more and more of this throughout the state, throughout all public bodies. We're seeing it with school boards. We're seeing it with local city councils. It's really an issue that is impacting all public bodies. And they run on a platform, and then when they get on the board, they want to implement that platform. And then they're surprised to find that there are policies in place that prevent them from implementing that platform. And that is why policy is your friend. Policy is incredibly important to keep up to date because, again, it is your guardrail to ensure that the board knows how to respond and how to act as a group. And oftentimes for school boards, our policy is set in statute. Most of the policy comes from statute. And so it's really important for boards to stay up to date because they need to do that to be in alignment with the law. And so oftentimes OSBA writes sample policy, and not everybody agrees with that policy. But most of the time, that's not policy that we're creating. That's policy that's coming from the law that we're interpreting and sending it out. And so once someone gets on the board and they want to change that policy, it's not actually something that can be changed because it's in law. And so that's something that isn't always understood until someone gets on the board and realizes that that can't be changed. And so it's something that we really encourage that you talk to legal counsel before you want to change any type of policy to understand whether or not that is something that you have the ability to change or that you need to have that reviewed by legal counsel to find out if that is something that's in statute that can't actually be changed. So it is really complicated when you are serving on a board, and you often don't know that until you're in that seat. Effective boards, they deliberate in public. They understand that respectful, spirited discussion and disagreement is okay, and it's often really healthy because it shows multiple sides of an issue, and you have constituents that care about multiple sides of an issue. But they practice unified governance, meaning that everyone supports the decision once the vote is made. And this is really critical. You can say your piece, and then once the vote is made and you leave the meeting, everyone supports that within the community. Because once again, if you don't do that, it creates chaos within your community, and people don't know that they can trust the will of the board or know where the board stands. And this one is really challenging because everyone wants the vote to go their way. But it's really important to understand that once that governing body has made a decision, everybody stands behind that decision. And it really helps make clarity for the staff as well. When individual board members try to direct the staff, go around the administrator, or freelance their role, trust erodes, role confusion can spread, and the organization destabilizes. And once this happens, it's really hard to get back on track. We really recommend that at that point you bring in some trained facilitators to help support that because it's challenging to get back on track with that, and so getting additional professional support is really helpful in additional training. Another really key component to a successful high-functioning board that is absolutely critical is the relationship with the executive. Boards provide direction and accountability, and the executive implements on that strategy. The most important job the board has is to hire and evaluate their executive. As was mentioned earlier, that is their only employee, and that is something that the board absolutely needs to remember, that is their only employee, that is the only person that they hire, and sometimes need to let go, but that is the only decision that they have. And then that executive is responsible for the team. A board's partnership with its executive is absolutely critical to the success. That needs to be an open, honest communication, but it's also really important that it is the board itself that governs the executive, so no one individual board member can give direction to that executive. Just like all decisions that are made by the board, that has to be a decision that is, or any direction has to be made by a vote of the board to give direction. And so that's something that helps create clarity for that executive. They know which way they're going. It helps make sure that everybody is rowing in the same direction. You have a really strong relationship often with the board chair and the executive, but when it comes to giving firm direction on this is something that you need to do, that has to be a vote of the board, not one individual. Trust, clarity, and mutual respect between the board and the executive reduces conflict. It improves decision-making. It makes positive impact for the rest of the organization. And most importantly, it keeps everyone focused on the mission. If you are spending most of your time talking about the board You are not in the right place. The board should be focused on the work of the organization and the work of the mission. And so I think that's a really good barometer of where the board is at. If you are spending a lot of time talking about yourself as a board, that's a good check of whether or not you might need some additional support. It's important to remember here that, I already talked about that. I'll skip that. Strong boards spend time and resources developing a strong board culture and teaming. The way a board operates together directly impacts the organization's effectiveness. And I think sometimes folks in the community or even on a board think that the board is a governing body and it's way up here and it's not interacting with the staff very much. And so if they're having conflict, maybe it's not impacting the staff. And research very clearly shows that if board is having conflict, it directly impacts the morale and the ability for the team to be able to function and meet the goals of the organization and serve the constituency. It's really hard to keep those two things separate and to be able to remain focused on the mission, because your executive is spending all of their time trying to help the board get into the right spot. And they should not be spending all of their time doing that. They should be spending their time implementing on the strategy of the board. The way the board operates directly impacts the effectiveness, and this can be a challenge. Effective boards model collaboration and respect in how they communicate and make decisions. They manage conflict constructively, using disagreements as opportunities to show the community that they can disagree and still remain committed to the common cause. So for us, that means that they are modeling, that they are making decisions that are student-centered. When they are talking and having conversations in the board meetings, those decisions are focusing around what's best for students, and always keeping students at the focus of the decisions that they're making and using data to make sure that those decisions are positively impacting students at the end of the day. So whoever your constituent group is, that should really be the focus of your conversations. A healthy board culture provides clarity and stability for staff. Conversely, boards that operate in dysfunction create uncertainty. Something that's really hard for staff is slow decision-making, mission creep, and they negatively impact the entire organization. Boards that learn together and continue professional development as an annual expectation have a positive impact on the organization. Their supportive behaviors include celebrating success in public, reflecting on their own performance, so being open and transparent and accountable about the board's performance, and maintaining confidentiality and ensuring a smooth leadership transition. So having a plan for if their executive leaves, that they have a plan for that transition, which is something that we're definitely seeing we need right now, especially as we are seeing retirements and that, of boards having really clear transition plans and succession planning. Lastly, consistent accountability. Accountability works best when it's clear, it's routine, and it's transparent. Boards should establish expectations for the executive and the organization with measurable goals, and those should be very visible to the community, to the staff, and to your constituency group. They should monitor progress on the strategic priorities regularly, not only during crisis, but we recommend calendaring that out, and again, being really visible with that so that everybody knows that it's coming. And then we recommend that effective boards communicate performance clearly to the public to maintain confidence. They should not shy away from hard conversations to keep communication open and transparent. And lastly, high-functioning boards welcome civic engagement as part of the accountability process and make that a routine part of their process so that folks feel welcome and part of their community. This is a way to stay grounded in the work and reminded that they represent the community and that elected them and not their own special interests. A high-functioning board will be able to effectively listen and not be taken off mission by the loudest voices in the room. We were just talking about this. that don't always represent the will of the majority. This is especially challenging right now in our political climate.
Of where you get it, or how you get it, or what you pay for it. It's a challenge, but it's something there. And how they're governed is just as important as how they're distributed and engineered. So we're governed by 5 commissioners. Each one of us have 2 city council wards, and 1 commissioner has the entire service area. So there's 5 of us, and we're elected by geographic wards, and the commissioners serve without pay. And it's a public service, not a compensated one. So we're there with no money. And some of the co-ops and things, they do get compensated, but ourselves, Springfield Utility Board and others, they don't get compensated. The way eWeb was formed was back in 1908, there was a typhoid epidemic in this community. There was a water system, and the citizens that here thought that they wanted to take it over because they knew how important public services were. And so in 1908, they formed the Eugene Water and Electric Board. And it was, they bought the system, and then they created it because the people thought the essential services were really important to be publicly owned and locally controlled. So we're chartered by the city of Eugene. We're created to provide just electric and water. Although we bill for 4 services, only 2 of them we provide. Stormwater and sanitary, they're not ours, but they're on the eWeb bill, and so when the eWeb bill goes up, 2 of those 4 aren't ours. So, sorry, Randy. And we're not managed by the city council. We're independent to manage. We get the ability to manage our rates and manage our water and electric services without direction. We cooperate with the city as much as we can, but we have to be autonomous because it's a highly specialized area. Excuse me, and it gives us the accountability directly to our customers and not political priorities. So how the decisions get made. The board, we underwrite a formal bylaw and Robert's Rules of Order. Leadership rotates annually, and board president convenes the meetings and oversees the meetings, and the vice president's there to help whenever they need and help set the agenda. We require a quorum for the commissioners for the monthly meetings, and motions, resolutions, and actions require affirmative majority vote. And that structure just actually creates clarity, prevents an ad hoc decision-making, and keeps discussions focused and fair. The board meets once a month, the second Tuesday of each month in the evening, and the community we have an open mic and open forum, and we usually, unless we have a lot of speakers, we allow 3 minutes, and we listen, but we do not engage, just like council. We do not go back and forth and engage because that would, it's not set there. But if somebody wants information to get back to it, they give their name and their contact information at the forum, and our staff gets back to them and tries to answer their questions. And it gives us the ability to hear what's on people's minds. And usually we only have 2 to 5 people. We very rarely have people come to us. But lately, smart meters, East 40th Water Project, College Hill, and just recently the Watershed Bill of Rights has brought a lot more people to the podium. And I'm sure next Tuesday may see some more, and that's good. We listen, but that's the first time in my 20 years we've ever had to limit the time people can speak and limit the total time of input. So there are some topics that are gathering more and more community interest, which is great. But, you know, we have the space for the public vote, but even when it's challenging. We were confronted about 5G, which has nothing to do with eWeb, but we were mandated to allow that technology to be put on the eWeb poles, and so everybody thought that was ours. And we had a lot of people come to the podium, talk to us about how bad it was and everything else, but again, we had nothing to do with it, and we couldn't do anything about it. It was federally mandated. So one of the things we do is we don't do many day-to-day operations. We're policy, and we have what's called IRPs, integrated resource plans, and things that go out in 5 and 10 years. Because right now we just signed a 20-year contract with Bonneville to get our power till all the contracts expired in 2028, and figure out where we're going to get our power and what it's going to be sourced. Because in Oregon, you can't there's no more gas plants, there's no nuclear. Wind and solar is sporadic. It comes around whenever the whenever the weather wants it to. And so hydro is so important, but they're not going to build any more dams. And so finding more power to meet this electrification and data centers and AI is a big challenge. And, but that's why we have 5 and 10-year plans to try and to meet that. And so one of the things we have to do is environmental stewardship, reliability and resiliency, affordability and equity, and then long-term community benefit. Those are things that we look to about when we're looking about what we're going to get and what we're going to do. And we invest heavily in board education to make sure that this is something, because everybody on that board, there's nobody that has an electrical background or a water background. We're just lay people that try and reflect community values. We have new commissioner orientations. We have non-quorum work sessions, so we can have 2 people meet with staff and not violate the open meetings law to get educated on things. And then we have one-on-ones with the general manager after every meeting. The general manager will meet with us, go over what we heard and what we said and what may be coming up. And then we also have board member packets. Many times our packets, our one for Tuesday it's one of the shortest meetings I've ever seen, and it's like 300 pages. And so but you know, there's like a quarterly report in there that has every aspect of the utility and measures it. And so it's like taking a drink out of a fire hydrant. It's really, really difficult to command everything because it's such a highly specialized industry. So it's daunting sometimes. So, but those things allow us to ask better questions, make informed decisions, and stay focused on the outcomes. Our general manager is, like Emily said, that's the only person that works for us. And they keep our board at a policy level, and it prevents us from, you know, we're not going into the weeds. We don't get into operational things, although we do approve all the contracts and things such as that. We have a consent calendar that allows us to do that quite efficiently. And we have a deep respect for the staff expertise, because that's a very, very technical thing. And for me to sit there and try and second guess how we're going to balance this power. I just got back from Washington, D.C. on Thursday, and we've been there all week lobbying, trying to deal with very extensive power contracts with Bonneville. And you'll read in the newspaper in a day or two, a court just ruled that and Oregon participated in that suit, that they're going to allow more water to be spilled in the Columbia, and what that's going to do is raise your rates. And then there's another thing about the Corps of Engineers and all the dams. There's 13 dams in the Willamette Valley, and only 6 of them generate power. It's the most inefficient system in the whole Corps of Engineers thing, and we're paying for that. We're subsidizing it. So there's a lot of things that are going to put upward pressure on rates, and but we stay out of the weeds. We let the experts deal with that. We set the policy. We want things to be affordable and reliable. Those are, but also respect the community values about stewardship. So kind of slowing down and getting to the end here, we have respect amongst the board members, respect for the staff, and a shared understanding of our roles. And the public utilities right now, we're facing an enormous challenge: climate change, affordability, and aging infrastructure. I learned a statistic when I first got on the board that in the 70s, Eugene built out an electric infrastructure similar to that equivalent to serve the city of San Francisco. Do the math, 1970 to 2026, everything's aging at once. It's like when you buy a new house and then you wonder why all the light bulbs burn out 10 years later because you were all brand new at the same time. Same thing with our infrastructure. So we're faced with monumental costs and increases, and we all have to work through that. But the governance that EWEB has, it's both we can be accountable and efficient, and we can be function professionally and strategically, and the community trust is one of the most important things, and respect is that, you know, people come to the podium and everybody wants to be heard and everybody wants us to do exactly what they say. But you remember, we have 96,000 meters and 240,000 customers just for electricity, and about, not the same with water, but only about 65,000 meters. But that said, we have to make sure that we reflect the community values, and we have to do it respectfully and diligently. And at best, a governance board just doesn't oversee an organization. It stewards a community, resources for generations, because we have a commodity that, again, like I said, you don't have a choice on. You don't have a choice of what you do. You have to have electricity. You have to have water. And you don't have a choice of where you get it. So we have to make sure that we are as respectful to community values and community desires as we can, but yet keep it within the bounds of the parameters of our values. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to City Councilor Randy Groves and let him tell you all about how the city runs.
Good afternoon, I guess it is. I want to start by thanking the City Club for inviting us here and holding this forum. I think this is very, very relevant right now, especially with things going on in our country and our state. And it's more important than ever that we are operating with functional boards, commissions, and councils. My name is Randy Groves. I am the Eugene City Councilor for Ward 8, which is southwest Eugene. In my ward, I also have, besides a lot of wetlands, I also have the majority of our commercial industrial West 11th zone. My ward runs all the way north to Royal Avenue, west to the city limits, south to the city limits, and a jagged line east starting at Chambers on the south end and stair-stepping back to City View. Prior to becoming a city councilor, as you heard, I was involved with our fire department and then fire departments. I spent my last 10 years as chief of department of Eugene Springfield Fire, which covers a population of the 2 cities, 7 contract districts, so knocking on the door of 280,000 people, where the city of Eugene's right about a little short of 180,000. The way our council is constructed is we have 8 council wards, and each one is roughly comprised of 22,000 residents. We are elected on offsetting 4-year terms, and so there's each election, every 2 years, there's 4 councilors up for election. And then during the presidential election, the mayor is also in that election for us. Our council are made up, and I like to say this to people, we are a group of lay people, of the people and for the people. In fact, I like to equate it to a nursery rhyme. We're the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. We don't have specific knowledge in most areas of our community. We rely on professionally trained and educated and experienced staff. And that's really important when you get into things like land use, running an airport, running a police department. I have knowledge in how to run a fire department, but that's my special area. So anyway, it's important to remember that. We follow the Eugene City Charter, which is kind of our constitution for local government. We also have a set of council operating agreements where we as a group have made agreements, and we meet on that periodically, usually in workshops rather than work sessions. Those are open to the public under public meeting laws. And that's where we refine those in time. That helps us kind of keep things on a somewhat even keel. In making my transition from being a firefighter to a counselor, I went from devising a series of strategy and tactics with the tactical objectives being measured with a stopwatch. Well, on council, we measure time with calendars. And so it's a very different pace. Took me a while to adjust to that. Also, I've always been kind of a hands-on person, and I spent my entire career until I became chief of department solely in operations. So very operational person. Even as chief, I would periodically run calls just to keep my hand in it and let my firefighters see that I'm still out on the street too. I think that that's important. And I try to carry that over to the council of not just sitting in meetings, but also getting out and engaging with constituents. And we all do that to one extent or another. It's a little easier for me because I'm retired, and most of my colleagues have to work to support themselves. In Eugene, we receive a stipend, not a salary, no benefits attached, but it actually costs money to be in office, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. We get tapped for donations, if not daily, at least weekly. There's many dinners we have to go to that we pay our own way to. There's just a number of things, certainly drive more, a lot of meetings, In a year, I buy a lot of coffee. Of course, that also helps keep me awake. But anyway, so that's kind of a little bit of the background. One of the things, and I think we had a really good presentation on basically the framework of how boards, commissions, and councils operate. And thank you, Emily, for that. And I appreciate John's wisdom sharing his experience on the eWeb board. But I know sometimes the public gets frustrated with us not having specific knowledge in an area. But unless that's been kind of your life's work and you've gotten the education for it, I think it's dangerous for us to start operating without a net and saying things. Because one of the things I have found, whatever you say comes back to you. And so you've got to be really careful and choose your words carefully. Now, going back to our meetings, John was talking about people showing up. During the last couple of years, I don't think we've had very many council meetings with a public comment period where we had fewer than 40 some odd people. And it's a lot of the same people that show up with the same issues. They get frustrated because we aren't responding back. But public comment period is a chance for them to speak and us to listen. And frequently, I think it's important that we have time to actually reflect on what we've heard and see how it fits into the larger scheme of things. Another thing I frequently hear is people will tell me, well, Eugene City Council is dysfunctional. I disagree with that. I think we're actually, right now, very functional. Now, do we agree on everything? Absolutely not. But if you go back to 1750 or 87, and the 55 delegates that went to the congressional or our constitutional convention, if you think they got along and agreed on everything, reread your U.S. history. It was a passion, work, and going back and forth. And I actually think disagreement, as long as it's respectful, leads you to better decisions. I know I always sought that in my command team running the fire department. I didn't want people that thought the same way as I did. I know how I think. I want to hear different perspectives. But the key was, once a decision is made, whether you agree with it or not, when we would leave the room, we would all support that decision. I would tell some of my chiefs, you don't have to go out there and say this is the best idea you've ever heard of, but what you have to say is, this is the decision, now it's our job to make it work. And I feel the same way serving on a council. Frequently, I don't necessarily agree with the direction, but once I've had my day in court in front of the council, and if I don't get my way, I don't have the right to go out and sabotage that. I need to do everything I can to make it successful. And I think that that's very important to having an effective elected body setting policy. The other thing, when people get only a 2, is that out of a scale of 1 to 10? Okay, I'm down to 2 minutes, so I better wrap this up. Thank you, Eric. God, now I lost my train of thought. I'm out of time, though, so I guess that's lucky for you. Thank you very much. You've been a very patient audience, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
So much great experience up here on this stage today. Before we begin our Q&A, a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station, KLCC, for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. In the metro area of Lane County, they broadcast on 89.7 FM, and in the Florence area on 88.1. For those listening at home or in transit right now, your household is one of several thousand tuning into City Club on KLCC. We're very grateful and honored to have you. You can also find all recent City Club programs archived at klcc.org, as well as on our YouTube channel and the City Club of Eugene podcast. Feel free to line up at the microphone, and we will have a short break before Q&A for our panel.
My name is Lisa Jenkins Easton. I am the president for Eugene Chapter 1 Classified Staff in 4J. I'm also on the OSCA State Board of Directors, Oregon School Employees Association, for those of you who don't know, and I'm also the recording secretary for the AFL-CIO Labor Chapter. For me, the elephant in the room today has been that you didn't mention labor at all and how it could relate to your boards. We've seen a lot of attacks and wreckage in Lane County specifically with education, particularly with bargaining this year. I'd like to know what you all think could be part of setting vision for publicly elected boards and how to relate to labor to prevent triangulation and confusion and pointing of fingers of saying that's not my responsibility.
I'll take a stab at that first.
Okay.
First of all, a little bit more about my background. I was actually a labor leader for 10 years, International Association of Firefighters, Local 851. And labor has a very important role, but in what we were talking about, how boards and councils function, I didn't really pick out any group to talk specifically about. We hear from labor, but we are not involved in collective bargaining. We are not involved in grievance arbitration. A city manager, in my case, that is connected, and her staff does do that. And one of the things I forgot to mention, in addition to the city manager, the Eugene City Council has 2 more employees, the presiding municipal court judge and the independent police auditor. But back to labor, we do listen to labor, we do meet with labor. I know I have frequent meetings and talk about various issues that are going on, and it helps me to know what labor's perspective is. And I sometimes call labor and ask them. Now, we don't deal with represented school board employees, but at least in the city of Eugene, that's been kind of my role.
Well, from the EWEB perspective, I mean, we have a union, and again, like the city council, we do not, as a board, deal with labor directly. However, we respect our employees because that's who we are. I mean, we're no better than our weakest link, but we have true professionals. IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. You think about those workers out there when it's 20 degrees out, there's no lights, and they work for 24 hours in an ice storm. We respect everything they do about their professionalism. It's just not a guy on a pole or a man or woman on a pole. Same thing with the water workers and the water treatment plant and everything else. But we have non-union workers as well, and we treat them equally. And so when we're up for a contract, which I think we're up for this year, we're starting negotiations. We stay out of that. We have HR and everything else. But I think collectively as a board, that's what's good about having a board it's a mix, and it's supposed to be a reflection of the fabric of the community. We respect what they do for a living, and they're true professionals.
What I heard described here this afternoon was kind of the ways that the board gets their information. And the majority of that information comes from the administration, the superintendent, or whoever that executive is, and their staff. That information is very carefully constructed and presented and metered out to a board. And then I also heard described the opportunity for public comment, and that happens with boards, right? The public can come and speak to you. That is a very one-way communication. So that allows a situation where executives and their team of administrators are insulated from the workers, from parents, customers, students, whoever your constituents are. What are some ways that boards can have two-way communication so that they're truly being informed about the policies that you're setting, the decisions that you're making, how those would or could impact students, customers, parents, the community?
Well, I'll lead off with that again. As I said, I go out and I meet with a lot of our labor unions. It depends what's going on at the time. I mean, sometimes there are active labor issues occurring. I always want to hear from them, but and I also mentioned, I learned by going out on the street and getting my hands dirty. I mean, it's more than just sitting at a desk. But those two-way conversations occur more one on a different labor unit rather than collectively as a group. Anytime in the city of Eugene that we have more than 4 counselors convene, it becomes a public meeting, which has to be noticed and then open to the public. And sometimes I think it's more helpful that we meet individually with a bargaining unit and hear what's going on. But I like to hear more than just from organized labor. I like to hear from the individual workers too, because sometimes, and I know from my own experience, the perspective might be slightly different. And the goal is to get as much information as we can before we make decisions.
From the perspective of eWeb, I mean, we do not interact with labor. We have HR that does that, and it's specific, and we're restricted from doing that. But however, interacting with staff, the other staff and things, we have all these one-on-ones and these two-on-ones where we meet with them and we learn about different projects and things and how the details are. And we have that level of communication, but more important about the consumers, about if I asked everybody in this audience this evening or this afternoon and say, what's more important, reliability or affordability? And everybody's going to have a different perspective. And so it's very important, in my opinion, to get out and communicate with the people, to go to the neighborhood meetings and things such as that and find out what's important to them. Because some people say, well, I want it to be green, I don't care what it costs. And other people says, I don't care what color it is, I want it to be affordable. And so it's a challenge to find that balance, because this is a volunteer position and to do that. But as far as the labor aspect from eWeb, we stay out of that. We have hired, trained professionals, but they do come to the podium and they do speak to us on occasion, and we hear them when they do that. And so it's not appropriate for a commissioner to go out and engage with people out in that are out and working in the field.
I think it's very challenging with the public meeting law, and you addressed that too. And sometimes it's even perception of more a quorum being together or having that two-way conversation, even if it's one-on-one, of speaking on behalf of the board. And a board member, and sometimes that can be blurred. And so if you're having a two-way conversation as an individual board member, it can sometimes be construed as speaking on behalf of the board, and that can be a really tricky situation for an individual board member to be in. And so it is a legal framework and structure that is set up through public meeting law and how boards have to operate. And so there are some very firm parameters that make it challenging to have that open dialogue, two-way conversation that are set up for transparency for the public to have that. And so it is, while it is good for transparency, it also limits that like one-on-one conversation.
Certainly limits, but I do want to applaud efforts of individual board members to, with curiosity, find ways to engage in two-way communication, even if it's just asking more questions and listening deeper. So thank you.
Eric, could I just do a quick follow-up on
Sure,
that?
of
Something
course.
else I thought about. After we merged the 2 fire departments, I set, of my 10 years as chief, 6 of those years we concurrently served, and where I sat on both the Eugene exec team and the Springfield exec team. The 2 cities operate differently. In Springfield, the city council actually ratifies a contract from the employer side. Eugene, the city council does not ratify a contract. So there's more limitations on the Eugene side. In fact, even on the Springfield side, when we surplused a $10,000 generator, I had to take it as chief to the council for approval. On the Eugene side, as chief, that wouldn't even cross my desk. That would be handled by a deputy chief. Thank you.
Hello, Doug Bovee, a City Club member for almost 8 years now. And I am interested in mostly eWeb activities as a volunteer with 350 Eugene. So I'm curious about, so we are very interested in energy sustainability, 350 Eugene is. Mm-hmm. And you guys seem like you are as well, based on the strategies that you mentioned regarding data center needs and storage needs and those kinds of things. So what is the eWeb board thinking about these days as far as storage, as far as geothermal energy, as far as offshore wind? And just thoughts, thank you.
Well, thank you. Kind of into the weeds, but I'll tell you about that. So, you know, the 350 Eugene is a great organization. They come to us all the time, and they tell us that their community values, but they want us to reduce carbon. We're already almost 94% carbon free. We're one of the leaders in the nation. And to get that last few percent, it's nothing money won't cure. But we have to be careful in seeing the affordability versus the carbon. Well, in Oregon, you can have no more gas plants and no more nuclear. We're not going to build any more hydro, and we have an increasing demand. And even if we could build wind farms, which we own, or solar farms, there's no way to get the power here. The last transmission line that was built, it's not done yet. It's been 19, and 100% of that electricity is going to an AI centers. It's not going to consumers. And so the problem we have is that even if we could create the resource, is getting it to the consumer, because the consumer's in the valley. The resource has to come from Eastern Oregon. And so it's a huge challenge. We appreciate everything that you guys bring to the table and keeping our toes to the fire on that. But again, it's that balance of trying to make sure that we can balance community values and affordability and reliability, because just in this cold spell we had in January, I had them do a graph. The wind didn't blow for 11 days. Now, who wants to go 11 days without power? Just because those resources, solar and wind, Mother Nature controls those. We don't. We control hydro, we control gas, and so it's called dispatchable. Everybody wants power at the same time of the day, and there's about 4 or 5 hours a day we have to buy it, and it's very, very expensive to buy. The rest of the time we have surplus power. So again, it's good that we have organizations like you. We're trying to make that balance. That's why we have the IRP, the Integrated Resource Electric Plan, and we're trying to balance that. And we just did that, and you know that balance. But trying to balance it with renewables is going to be very, very challenging. We love renewables. We love battery storage. We love wind. We own wind. We buy from solar. We buy from biomass. So we're diverse. But it's a challenge, and it's a balance. And so, again, we've got a lot of people that are making choices between food, medicine, and electricity. And electricity and water you don't have a choice on. And it's a tough decision to make people make that decision. So it weighs heavily on us, but we're listening, and we're listening, and we appreciate you coming to the podium. Well, that's an EWEB question. I hope that answered your question.
My name is Bill Kento. I've been a Eugene resident since 1972. First, I'd like to say thank you for your presentations. I would give you more than a 2.
Thank you.
This is my question. Based on what you've read, seen, or have experienced, what recommendations or suggestions do you have for improving the accountability of elected public officials?
I'll take the first stab at this. Pretty much every legislative session, more laws are enacted that do just that. I think that in fact, I'll say that there are so many rules right now. It is tough as a layperson to keep up on all of them. And I know the state would say that they send out information, but I mean, it comes out in stacks electronically, but it's very long in legalese, and it's really easy to miss some things. But I think, and penalties are growing for those mistakes. So that's kind of my 20,000-foot response.
$175,000, and in 4 years they amass a $30 or $50 million portfolio. They're good. And so, but you know, I guess at our local level, it's the accountability is through the election process. I've been there 20 years. This is my 6th term. Nobody's ever even filed to run against me. I've never even set up a campaign thing. So if somebody wants to, go ahead. I got some fishing to do. But I just really think that it's important that you be open and honest. And you know, I have this old saying: when you're getting run out of town, jump in front of it and call it a parade. When you're at the short end of a boat, and you just turn around and you say you agree, and you're transparent and say, you know, we made a mistake, or we listened, but we're going to do it this way. I think it's being open and honest and communicate.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there are a lot of accountability measures in place, and sometimes to the point where it makes it hard to govern, and to have, it's almost beyond transparency, where it's hard to be transparent because there's so many rules, to be able to have the meetings be effective, because there's so many rules for the leadership to be able to follow and stay up to date on as volunteers, and they are changing with every single legislative session. And so for small bodies that don't have a general counsel or someone there to guide them through the process, it can be really, really challenging. And the one avenue that Oregon has is through the elective process and the recall process. And so that is your local body letting people know how they feel about it, and that's the biggest accountability that we have. But in terms of, you know, legislative, there's a lot there and a lot of rules to follow.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but we've run out of time for questions and answers, and I'd like to ask Thomas to come back to the podium to wrap up the show. Please give our guests a warm welcome.
Thank you, Eric, and that is all the time we have for today. So please join me in thanking eWeb President John Brown, Eugene City Councilor Randy Groves, and Oregon School Boards Association Executive Director Emily Nishik. This has been our February 27th, 2026 conversation at the City Club of Eugene. We'll be back here next week at Wow Hall in downtown Eugene on Friday, March 6th at noon. That program is called Black History is American History. It's sure to be a great forum, and we're looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you. Have a great weekend or week, and we'll see you next time at the City Club of Eugene.